All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Sherry Grossman. Hopefully you can hear me through a mask since we're in person. We have to be masked. I did think about doing this from home where I didn't have to be masked. But once in a while, you got to get out of the house for good mental health, right? So I'm glad we're all here today and on video. And so I am a board member of JCFS. And also a member of Temple of Jeremiah and also involved in the sisterhood. And so I'm pleased that we have this great partnership between Temple of Jeremiah and JCFS. And when I was at a sisterhood meeting in October, we were talking about a topic and we felt the topic that we're going to present today was going to be very relevant. And I said, I know just the people who are the experts and I'm happy to make an introduction. So that's why we have members of JCFS here. And then after the event, I'm assuming that you can connect with them. If you were here, there was materials to give you, but we'll get you materials. And if you want to, you can always reach out to me to talk about JCFS. I just think it's a fabulous organization, and Temple Jeremiah is very lucky to have this great bond with JCFS because they are a wonderful organization. So I thank all of you for attending, and I am going to turn it over now to the experts. Ben Goldberger, who is an LCSW, is the Assistant Director of the Virginia Frank Child Development. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Jean and parents, welcome everybody. Glad you could make it. So today we are going to talk about reducing anxiety with healthy communication and limit setting. We're going to have two presenters. They're going to give two brief presentations. And we ask that you hold your questions until the second half of the program. I've got some note cards for the people who are here so you can write questions down, and then we'll have a question and answer. So our first presenter is going to be Josh Berman. Josh is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice, and he is a clinical consultant for Virginia Frank Child Development Center. Josh was also previously a training therapist at the Therapeutic Nursery for 7 years. A while, yeah. Before it recently closed. And then after Josh, you'll hear from Pauline Govins, who's also a licensed clinical social worker and senior clinician at JCFS's Skokie office. She's also a certified or PMHC, which is a perinatal mental health certified. And she will be talking about, let's say we'll divide it roughly into 0 to 5 and 6 to 12. So without further ado, I'm going to pass out, let's see, we'll start with Josh's presentation. I'll pass that material out to you. And here you go. There's a couple of these over to you. Pass these around. Oh, but there you go. Oh, keep on there. Right over and switch.
Yeah. We ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So glad to be here. Thanks for the introductions. We're gonna, today we're gonna be talking about communicating with young children, and between the ages of probably, less zero to 6, or more probably toddlerish to 6, and then a break 6 to 12. A lot of this for people who are, who have kids and kids who are bigger. A lot of this is going to be, there's going to be elements of review in it, but I think what we're trying to do is talk about a framework for kind of thinking about anxiety and thinking about symptoms over time, and how we think about behaviors that we see and the meaning that that behavior might have. So, I think the first piece of any of it, like with our framework, especially at Virginia Frank, is we're often when people are coming and bringing their children in, the first thing we're trying to ask is like, what do these behaviors mean? We're not necessarily, we're first trying to help get rid of symptoms and help solve problems, but the first step is like, what does it mean? So for us, the first step for us is thinking about communicating with children, defining the goals of communication. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to connect? We're trying to teach, trying to get information, trying to think about facilitating, expressing emotions. Are they seeking help? Are they seeking emotional support? And often for us, I think, as parents, as teachers, as therapists, we have to think about, are we trying to stop dangerous behavior? Are we trying to stop annoying behavior? And how does that, what are the differences between those things? And then how does my goal match with the goal of the child? What is the child trying to get right now? Especially when we're seeing like really difficult and kind of, anxious behavior, little annoying behaviors. So I'm gonna talk, this is a presentation that could be days long, but I'm gonna try to talk I'm gonna say, since we're already running a little behind, I'm gonna talk for maybe 5 minutes. They are set 7 minutes, about 9:45 now, because I think there's a lot to go over. So basically, I'm gonna start with discipline versus punishment. What are the differences? How limit setting, why is limit setting so difficult? And I think, and then kind of how to figure out how to ask ourselves the right questions about what we're trying to get from our young kids and what information we're trying to share. So discipline, it sounds like disciple, which is what, of course, to teach, discipline's a teaching process where we instruct, we train, we educate children towards the goal of self-regulation, right? For controlling themselves. We're a co-regulator trying to help them slow down and let us help them. And that's what we're trying to encourage them, to come to us, right? So discipline is how parents demonstrate expectations, and it's the first part of limit setting. When we set limits with kids, we're teaching them, of course, how to avoid danger, how to be safe. And we're helping children know what is socially acceptable in our house, and then what might be, kind of the different fields of what's appropriate at school might not be appropriate at home, might not be appropriate with grandma, might not be appropriate, the different spots. It also shows them how much we care. So one of like an anxiety killer in a way are these limits and are these structures that we create for them. It demonstrates that we, because we stop you, we care what you do. And that gives them a sense of security, helps them control themselves. Of course, this takes a long time to do. And I think on top of it, it's very difficult. We say this a lot at Virginia Frank. It's very difficult to measure internal structure. You want to know, like someone says, when will they stop doing this behavior? When will this be easier? And I think that's I think it's easier for us to measure with them what we're learning how to do and what we're learning about the behaviors that we're seeing. So in all of this, kind of helps us know what to expect from ourselves, become better observers of ourselves as parents, as teachers, and then it lets the kids know what to expect from each other, how to close that cycle. So what is the difference between discipline and punishment? These words are often used interchangeably, but here's some differences, right? Discipline's not physical punishment or any kind of punishment. Punishment has more in common with retaliation to us, and punishment often linked to inflicting penalties and threats. And so, in a lot of presentations we might hear be like, what are common responses, you can think of between, adults and children and children to adults. And that's maybe something to think about for the second half is like, what kind of fights are you getting, in with your kids? And what are, what are the real battle points, that you're working on. But I think an important piece for us, I think, to think of, and this goes, I think, all caregivers, is what do we do when we feel like we want to retaliate, to a kid who's, giving us a really hard time? And how do we help kids slow down enough to watch what they're, to observe themselves, what they're doing to us, what we're doing to them, and how to slow the whole process down, which is, I think, quite a challenging thing, and especially in the time of COVID, where, you've been set on 10, for 2 years. I think this is, it can be very helpful to slow the process down. So why is setting limits so difficult? So, and this is going to be kind of wrapping up my end of it. It's about 9:50. Why is it so difficult? Well, it could feel like we're denying the child what they want. That's a very difficult, that can be very difficult. It's hard to tolerate unhappiness or anger, or any of the feelings that we see kind of are in response to these limits. Can feel that we're constantly getting into a power struggle, which leads us to avoid like any limit, because who has the time to do it? We don't always know, even when you really are good at setting limits, it's hard to know what is the appropriate limit that changes over time. What was appropriate for, my 4-year-old? Is it appropriate for this 12-year-old? Like, how does that change over time? And the thing that you were really good at as a therapist, as a teacher, with your 5-year-old, that's a very different intervention with a 10-year-old. And I think that can be kind of difficult too. Like, if you were someone, for instance, who's really good at lap time's it's not so much the same thing for a 9-year-old. Even though you might miss it, that really worked, it doesn't work anymore. So so we hear a lot of different messages about how to set limits and discipline, and we want to get it right. And so that can be kind of an obstacle, like this kind of wanting it to, not so much perfection, but wanting to make sure that we're actually setting a limit that makes sense. And of course, I think it's really stressful. And I think for parents, every limit that's set is basically another job for us to do. Every time we say no, it's really more work. And I think that can be pretty challenging, I think. So, I think, so what would be, how do we get to, from discipline and limits and all that to cooperation? And here's some, all of this information is on the sheet that we'll give out, and we would love to hear questions about it. And because I think each one of these topics is actually I think lives a long life in detail, and so we could talk about each case, at length. But so what can we do? Be clear about rules and consequences. Get better at learning to read children's cues, to know what situations are most difficult for them. Describe what you see and label children's responses. What I mean by that is it can be very easy to, like, a way to slow ourselves down in these limit setting moments is like we are narrating a bit of what the thing that we're seeing that we don't like, exactly what's happening, and then telling them what we're seeing them do. And so we're like, okay, I'm seeing this, it helps us slow down and helps them see. Use clear, simple sentences that your kid can understand. Try to talk about feelings if you have an idea about what's happening. Giving a warning about what's about to happen. Suggest what child can do instead. And I think a piece of levity, humor, and also some patience can help with the situation. So with this, I'd like to turn it over to Pauline to what's next.
Thank you, Josh. Good morning, everybody. So Josh focused a little bit more on the younger kids under 5, and I'm going to talk about kids from 6 to 12. But everything that Josh shared applies, of course, to kids, really throughout their life. Their principles of good parenting. So I wanted to start by highlighting how, as children grow from being very dependent on us as parents to being more independent, and that a parent's job changes to from that of having more control over their child in order to really keep them safe, to allowing them as they grow physically, emotionally, and intellectually to test test their own strengths and limits. And now parents have to actually promote for the children to be self-reliant, increase their self-esteem by mastering different tasks, and encourage them to grow self-discipline so that they set limits, they internalize setting limits for themselves. I want to give a couple of examples that I think might help illustrate the points I wanted to make. So you're pulling up to school to pick up your 7-year-old, and they enter the car and they start crying and telling you that nobody likes them. Or the 9-year-old that's throwing a tantrum because they can no longer go to their friend's house because somebody has COVID. So where do you start? So the place to start is always by taking a minute and noticing how you're feeling as a parent in that moment. When you were pulling up at the school, you weren't expecting your child to come in tears, feeling like nobody likes them, and that can be very difficult for a parent. And then observe your child and see if they are in a place where they're ready to talk maybe about what's happening to them and that what the anxiety is about, or if maybe their body even is so they're crying, they're stomping their feet, where you may want to start first by helping their bodies calm down, and then you can engage more of their ability to think and problem solve. So this has been referred to as maybe like a top-down or bottom-up approach, like starting with the thinking, a calm child that is talking to you about the problem, that's ready to problem solve, versus the bottom-up where you are helping them regulate their body first and be in a relaxed state in order to then talk. So the 7-year-old that comes in and is crying and saying nobody likes them, you're going to start with some of the things that Josh already described, such as validating for them that they're crying, they look so sad, they're disappointed. You're painting a picture of what you're seeing their body do. You're crying. It sounds like you feel nobody likes you. And this is letting the child know that you are noticing what is happening to them. You are acknowledging what is happening to them and what their experience is in that moment. And that in itself starts the process of calming them down, because you are there to be with them in this very difficult moment that they're having. Similarly, with the 9-year-old that might be throwing a temper tantrum because they wanted, they were looking forward to going to the friend's house. You may say, you look very angry, you're stomping your feet, you're disappointed. And then waiting for them through that process to get to a place where they may be more able to converse with you. So connecting with your child is the place to start with, helping them reduce their anxiety. You want to notice the feelings that are coming up, first of all, for you and your own body sensations, and take a minute to be prepared to talk to your child. Describe what you observe in your child in simple words. Try to understand why they're behaving the way they are. Josh already spoke about how you were looking for the function of the behavior, whether they're misbehaving or they're crying. There's something they're trying to tell us. And then decide on how you want to proceed. Is this a safety issue? Is this something that as a parent you have to intervene? Or is this maybe a time where the child is old enough to start practicing resolving the issue for themselves? Validate their wishes and their feelings without necessarily feeling like you have to make them happen. It is sufficient to just acknowledge that, for example, the child was really looking forward to going to the friend's house. And the most important thing that I'd like to highlight today, that it is important that as parents, we can sit with our kids when they're having big feelings, rather than trying to make them feel better or fix the problem. Kids need to know that they can tolerate big feelings and that they don't have to distract from them Grown-ups are often trying to distract themselves from their own big feelings, through alcohol and, eating or binge watching. And with kids, we start with kids by saying, even if they're devastated, right? Feelings come and go, and big feelings are, we remind them, you're not always going to feel like this. And I'm here with you through this difficult time. Being with our child, we refer to as co-regulating with our child. We're helping them regulate their feelings because their feeling thermostat is not yet, set. And as we do that more and more with our child, and they get older, then they do it for themselves. Some of the mistakes that we make as parents is that we forget to focus on how we say what we say. We may overreact, and then the kids focus on our overreaction rather than what we're trying to help them with. We may fail to apologize to our kids when we make our own mistakes. We may lay down the law when we are emotional and reactive, and then realize later that we overreacted. We may forget that kids will need our help more than once to learn to make good choices. Just one, they're not going to learn just from one time. Sometimes we may consider an audience when we're disciplining, if their child is misbehaving, let's say in public. We may get trapped in power struggles. We may discipline in response to our habits and feelings rather than what our child needs. If we have an idea of what a 10-year-old, for example, is supposed to be able to do rather than what our 10-year-old is able, what our 10-year-old strengths and weaknesses are and what our 10-year-old is able to do, it will be more effective if we parent for our particular child rather than our idea of what our child should be able to do. Sometimes we embarrass kids by correcting them in front of other people, or we may talk too much. A word on consequences. Josh talked about punishments and the difference between punishment and discipline. With older kids, we talk a lot about consequences, and the goal of consequence is not to inflict pain, but to promote self-discipline. They have to learn that if they go to school and they forget their lunchbox, well, what are their options? What are their options for that day? Perhaps they'll go hungry that day. Hopefully they won't forget it the next day. So whenever possible, use natural consequences. They should be age appropriate. They should be consistent. They should not be issued when you're angry. And if you don't know, especially if in a moment you're feeling very angry, you may tell your child that, you may have to think about, what just happened and how you want to deal with it and get back to them, better than issuing a consequence that you can't follow through with, or that is ending up being a punishment. And the most important thing even is to follow through with what you actually, with the consequences that you may set. Hopefully you will take something away from our presentation today, and there might be some parenting adjustments you think you may make. We were all learning. I'm still learning as a parent. So we all talk about picking our battles. You may want to prioritize an area as a parent that you feel you may want to change. Start small. Try a new skill under low stress situation. Let's say you're trying to get your child to brush their teeth, but it may be best to work on the nighttime toothbrushing rather than the morning time toothbrushing, because in the morning, everybody's got to get out of the house at a certain time. So the nighttime might be a low stress situation to try a new skill. Involve your child in finding solutions for whatever the limit setting needs to happen. Practice with your child, let's say over the weekend, if they're always having, if the morning is always a very anxiety provoking time for the family over the weekend, have a conversation and talk about how can we make the mornings easier. And wear the oxygen mask first, as they tell us on the planes, right? To take care of yourself. We're no good to our children if we don't take care of ourselves first.
Great. Well, thank you, Pauline and Josh. That was concise and dense and rich. I think the next section of this is questions and answers. And this is an opportunity we've got about 25 minutes to any questions that may have come up or other questions, something outside of what was discussed that you'd like to bring in. And this is kind of an open format to do that. You can direct it to anybody here, and I'll just give a 5-minute warning at about 10:25 if we get that far, to let everyone know that we are that we're going to wrap up soon. So
I'm gonna jump in with a question, if that's okay. First off, thank you. Yes, this could be a month's worth of curriculum. Oh my gosh. Can either of you talk about balancing how you prioritize when you have two children in the household and they have varying behaviors that might be difficult and unfortunately affect either or. So one child's behavior may negatively affect the other child's behavior and creates this vicious cycle. How do you prioritize? How do you cope with those situations?
Well, first of all, I think all situations like that, I think are of course individual, but I would say it's a little like leading a group. I think in like our family style therapy that we think about a lot, and I think it's good to, at first, like the thing that, I think that I talked about, Pauline talked about, I think is like narrating what is happening, trying to slow the situation down. Because yeah, of course, I think, one child, one child will try to get, the other, there's, what will you see? You'll see one child trying to give feelings to the other child back and forth. He did it, they did it, she did it, or some kind of, contagion of manic, laughter about like something that just, it can be like, how do I get rid of this feeling? I think like half of the time there's like, you're trying to set a limit. They're saying they don't want this limit. No kid does really. And I think the sharing with you, I think there needs to be some separation. And I think there needs to be some identification of like, what is happening? It's just like, I think it's like when you see a really kind of kooky games that almost seems a little dangerous for 4 and 5-year-olds. The thing to do is to say, stop. What's the game? What are we doing? Like, what's happening? Tell me a little bit about what's happening. So like, I think the first thing is kind of like, slow it down, identify what you're seeing. And if you can, I mean, I think one of the issues for us is like, often we just want it to stop. Whatever it is, we're busy, there's something else happening, we're trying to get out of the house or do this other thing. And it's really hard to just say, to do the sorting that we're kind of asking, to do. But I think over time, you can get a lot better at identifying what you're seeing, identifying what we feel about what we're seeing, and it can be a bit of a shorthand, like, because at the bottom of it, I think the question is, okay, what are we actually wanting? What are we actually fighting about? What do you actually want? Stop, like kind of slowing it down and trying to get at like what you're actually needing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that does make clear sense.
Okay.
So, thank you.
I kind of look at this as could go for any age.
Oh, yeah,
I
I agree.
My kids are older. I'm like, gosh, I wish I had had this earlier. It's not like I haven't heard it before, but even just hearing it again, it's like even at any age, it's, the whether it's the discipline versus punishment or regulating yourself.
Yeah.
Because, your kids do something and you're like, oh my God, what were you thinking? And it's like, wait a minute, back up.
Yeah.
Not the way to express.
That's
the situation.
I agree. I was thinking, Pauline was talking about like when the kid comes in to the car and is so upset, like what I think the boiled down version of it, it's like you're trying to capture the feeling, like to really take care of this terrible feeling and not be so alone. Like that is like all of us, right? The adult, the thing, whatever, like there's always that moment of like, how do we connect with taking care of this terrible feeling? And with kids and defenses and all of the stuff that's happening, it can get quite complicated, but I think, yeah, it's like definitely a lifetime issue.
Yeah.
So like Lisa's saying, like my kids are also around the same age, and I'm sitting here and going, God, I wish I sat through this 20 years ago, because one of the things that, because I was a working mom who traveled, that you don't have the time, I was the fixer. Like they got into the car and I'd be fixing it already. I wouldn't be dealing with any of their emotions. I would just be going, okay, how can we change this situation?
Mhm.
And so I guess the one thing that I'd add to your presentation is, don't be the fixer, that's not your job. Maybe somebody should have told me that 20 years ago.
Well, I think it's complicated because we aren't fixers, right?
Mm.
But I think the question is like, how do we? I think that Pauline said it as well. It's like we are trying to avoid feelings as well. It's like you're busy, you have work to do, it's overwhelming. And so how do you do both? Right? How do you attend a bit to the feelings while fixing a problem that has to be fixed? I think that's a really difficult balance.
Yeah. And, you know, the younger they are, the more fixing perhaps we do. The older they are, the less fixing we should do and let them struggle with it a little bit more while they have a safety net to make mistakes and fail and before they go out into the world. Yeah.
Well, I just talk about the fixing. My college son called last semester freaking out about his physics class. And instead of going, okay, why are you feeling this way? You know, what happened there? It was like, okay, get a tutor, go talk to a teacher. Yay, drop the class if you need to.
That's exactly me. That's totally me. I'll tell you recently, because my kids are 26 and 23. I've heard some of these kinds of presentations, and my daughter came to me with something. I said, well, how does that make you feel? And what do you think you're gonna do about it? And she goes, oh, no, you didn't raise me that way. I need to know.
Well, I think that speaks to, you're training yourself as a parent to pause and change the frame. I'm gonna ask a question instead of giving an answer first. I may have an answer in a few minutes, but first, and then it's also modeling, oh, well, I can regulate myself, it's, you're the teacher of that. And then when they start to see you repeatedly saying, wait, what's going on here? And then what's going on now the ball's in your court, we start or construct a narrative together,
That's funny, because my son, like, after the fact, he said, I really just needed you to say, we know you can do it. Okay. Way to give him confidence.
No.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying, I mean, but it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think we want to help. I
Mhm.
think that this is like the difficulty is how do you let someone do that when
Right.
you're really worried?
Because how do they learn to solve the problem themselves if we're always solving it?
Right, yeah, but it's hard, but that's a
Yeah.
difficult thing to stop
Oh,
because
yeah.
that thing, we kind of know that works.
Mhm.
And I think so much of like some of the anxieties are about mystery. Right, it's about not knowing what's gonna happen, not knowing what the thing is, and so it's like, I have a problem with physics, well, there's no way you could, you're taking on probably a bit of that feeling, he's like, I don't know what to do, and you're like, you don't know what to do, and so it's like, how do you, and so how does that feel, and I think the first, so I think when we become kind of better observers of like, wait a second, I'm trying to do everything, oh, this is overwhelming,
Yeah.
this is really hard, and to try to slow it down.
Well, I think the other thing, though, with the consequences part of this, regardless of the age that it's happening, as parents, not that we don't want our kids to suffer on, certain consequences for things, but whether it's you missed a basketball practice and now you have to sit out for the next game, and how is that going to affect you at this point? And that, there's all these, and those are like minor,
Sure.
nothing things, but you're thinking, oh my gosh, now they're not going to make the team. And whether it's a sports thing or it's a school thing, oh, they didn't turn in that homework assignment. How is that going to affect their grade? And then when they're, it's one thing if they're in like, up to 8th grade, but once they get to high school, oh my gosh, that's going to affect their grade. How's it going to affect the college they're going to and the SAT scores? And it spirals. And I think that's part of the anxiety on the parent side that we then kind of give to our kids. And then, now take back. And I think in the age of COVID, with what's going on with teaching in the schools, that's even spiraling. So I think that's part of it, is our anxiety about what's happening, and we're handing that to them.
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Is there anything you're doing, speaking of COVID, is there anything you're doing differently or guiding parents differently during these 2 years of COVID where everybody has some level of anxiety that we're operating with? I think it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the parents that I've, the child cases that I'm working with, I feel like you're doing even more kind of hand holding with the parents because everybody is so stressed. And the more I kind of take care of the parent, the better able they'll be able to take care of their child. And really just increasing the parents' own reflection on this really sucks. This has really disrupted my life. And if you're feeling this way, imagine how your child is feeling, who is terrified of, the sickness or the illness or the virus or the bug and not seeing their friends, to just really increase their ability to stay empathic because everybody's fried. Everybody's, it's
I
awesome.
like to ask,
Yeah,
excuse me,
I think also, I don't know if this was your experience, but I feel like a lot of cases that would have been child cases turned into parent cases. This was early on. I would say the first year of COVID, I saw more parents. And I felt like the interventions were like stuck more. I felt like I was more connected to like what the actual problem was. I'm really speaking to parents of 4, 5, 6-year-olds. So it's like a little bit different, I think, when you're talking about older kids. But I think like really talking to parents about what they're seeing, how they're seeing it, what it feels like, and really connecting. It's of course all over Zoom. So we were learning that, which was a huge difference. But it was like, I really felt like parents felt less pressure to show up at the office, drive an hour or half hour and then drive back. It's like none of that's gone. So like all those obstacles are gone. You're in the house, which is its own weird thing. The frame's a little different. But I think it gave parents, I think, a little bit more time, or maybe just out of desperation. I don't know. Just they were more available, I think, to what we were selling. And I felt like a lot of good connections were made over that, which I think is a little bit different, just because I think sometimes the obstacles to treat, to therapy, to showing up, there's just time, it's really difficult, I think, everyone's got everything going on. And I saw a lot of parents.
What about young kids? Since you see young kids, you took like a 4-year-old, for the past 2 years, they haven't even socialized, right? So some of their social skills that they would get before they enter kindergarten, they don't have, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm worried about them. I mean, the nursery that we've run for 50 years closed.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's been a really difficult time, I think, for parents of 2, 3, 4-year-olds. 2-year-olds are now 4. So like, yeah, they're missing a lot of stuff. And I think, and as Pauline said, everyone's fried. So you have a lot. There's a lot going on. And so, yeah, no, I think that's been a difficult thing. And I'm not even 4-year-olds who were maybe needing treatment. It's more of a parent. You're kind of almost trying to help the parent become a therapist, give the intervention you might have given.
Yeah.
And like really to train like how to do it and like what it might be and like learn. So you're trying to learn about them, who they are, what it is, and then how to deliver that thing. So yeah, I think 4-year-olds are missing a lot. In certain communities, I think that there was less disruption, like they were in school the whole time, but but there's still, the world is happening. And I think there's a lot of missing pieces for that, I think, for preschoolers, absolutely.
And we're also offering socialization groups for the really little ones, 2 to 3-year-olds in person in 2 locations, Northbrook and out in Toohey and Kedzie,
Oh, okay.
that office. Yeah.
That's great.
Mhm.
I'd like to ask a question,
I
please.
see Jean, you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
So Jean, if you want to text me, you're more than welcome to, but I haven't had anybody ask any questions.
Okay. I am unmuted.
So,
You can't hear me.
well, thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has been great.
Definitely eye-opening. even-
Again, I'll sign up for the year-long course on this.
Oh,
I want to,
Just for you, Lisa and I are just,
Yeah.
yeah,
I live with a therapist. I get this all day long.
I do want to hand out these little kind of bookmarks,
Oh, good.
contact information, and the access number, our main intake number for JCFS. So, which is a great way to access resources, and it's sort of like a clearinghouse for all kinds of everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Can get kind of directed. So I'll hand a few of these out, and then I can just leave the rest.
Moving on,
Yeah.
I'll take care of it.
Okay, so I can hand that.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Great.
Good job.
Yes.
Yeah, likewise. I know.